we leave, we will still be there. So we would love for people to let us know how we're doing and for them to let us know how they are doing as well.
Okay, let us get started now that I made sure that Facebook Live is running. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, welcome to our Mindful Wednesday meeting. I feel like it's been a while since we virtually connected. We want to hear from our participants. How are you doing? How is this new school year working for you and the families? There have been many changes occurring with the COVID phases, right? So we have two pieces of good news. One, I'm happy to hear that Orange County is moving towards the right direction. I don't know how it is by you, Sheikh, but here, alhamdulillah, Orange County is moving into, I believe, the purple phase, where there's going to be back to in dining, and schools apparently are going to be going back in person within the next week or two. So I want to congratulate everybody on the efforts you put to staying safe during the pandemic.
You know what? I'm not sure, but I think our local schools are doing this semester virtually, online. But they said that they were going to play it by ear, and every now and then they were going to consider what is going on, what is happening with COVID. But I think a lot of people are just ready to go back.
Yeah,
people want to go back to school. People want to go back to work. People just want to be. We want our freedom back, I think is what people want. But we want to do it responsibly. So we only want to do that when it is safe for us, for our families, for our loved ones, for ourselves, and also for the people around us as well.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I absolutely agree with that. I do want to talk to everybody a little bit. I want to tell you guys a little bit about Access Cal. You do know we're here to serve and support the community. We offer many services, including mental health, immigration, employment, refugee assistance. Our office is open Monday through Friday. In fact, our office has actually never shut, even when the heart of the COVID took place. Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We do strongly encourage you to call, though, because we want to make sure that we can practice social distancing as best as we can. Being a nonprofit agency, for those of you who don't know, actually how it runs, we depend on the funding of the grants. And those grants come from the county. And the county serves us those grants from the government. So with that being said, we want to make sure that the government knows we're here and we need those services. How will they find out, you ask? The census. So please, we urge you to complete the census, as it guarantees that your name has been registered, your information has been put there, or your demographic information. And so it helps the government allocate funding to the necessary areas. Super important. For those of you who don't know me, to any of our new viewers, my name is Sara Bijawi. I am one of the therapists here from the mental health department. We offer free counseling services. Yes, I said free. And we encourage you all to reach out. We hold therapy sessions, weekly sessions. We also offer one-time consultations. So if you're interested in seeking counseling, please do contact us, and our therapists would happily be here to assist you. One of the objectives we strongly believe here at the agency is stigma reduction. And I know stigma reduction is always something that Sheikh Yasser repeats during our Mindful Wednesdays. In our community, seeking services, especially when it comes to mental health, seems to be not so common because of the stigma that is attached. So in order to break that barrier and embrace mental health, Access California actually initiated a conference. So at the time, it was meant to gather the community and bring awareness to our mental health. And 3 years later, we are still holding that annual Peace of Mind conference. In fact, this year's conference was actually set to happen back in April at the new Delhi Center. But as you all know, the pandemic hit and it put a hold on it. So we got together as a team and figured out a way to still launch the conference, but ensure the safety of our participants. This year, we are holding the conference virtually. I'm super excited to be a part of it. And Sheikh Yasser, I'm sure I speak on your behalf when I say you're super excited to be a part of it too. We have a jam-packed schedule arranged for you and your family to participate and engage. I want to share the flyer with you all. So if you can give me a second, I will go ahead and share the screen. We just actually finished it as the date is approaching super soon. So give me 1 second. Once I can figure this out, which I will, Sheikh, before you get any.
I know, I was about to say something there. But I'm just going to pretend like I am hooking my laptop
It's
to the
here.
charger so
It
that,
is
you know.
here. I promise it's here.
Yeah.
But when I'm in the actual Zoom, okay, not that one. Here we are, open.
Yeah, as long as you do it this evening, inshallah, we'll be fine.
Done. Sooner than this evening, literally a second. There we go. Third annual Peace Conference. Save the date, everyone. We are actually going to be holding two different conferences. Well, two different sessions rather for the same conference. 12 to 2. So that's going to be the end of this month, September 27. And then the following Sunday, which is going to be October 4, you are welcome and actually encouraged to attend both sessions because each session will address different topics. So it's not that you're going to be joining one or the other, although you are welcome to join one or the other or both. And the speakers will be addressing topics for both the adults and the youth for the entire family from the comfort of your home. It is going to be running for 2 hours, but we are going to offer you so many different activities and lessons from it throughout it all. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to make use of the chat box regarding that. Otherwise, look out for flyer and website to be launching very, very soon. Again, this is actually only 4 Sundays away. And we're really excited to have you. Sheikh Yasser, anything you want to add? I know that I unfortunately hadn't been there in the past, but have you?
Oh, yes, I have been there several times. It is actually beautiful. You get a lot of community members to participate. It's very diverse. And what I loved about it was always the relevancy of the topics that we discussed. I love the fact that it was the nonprofit, which is Access, along with other organizations, and also the county. You know, the county would bring in their talents as well. They would bring in their experience in addition to the, you know, to what we do as a nonprofit that is ethnically and culturally competent to address our issues in ways that make sense to our community. And I think that really what makes Access so unique. So, yeah, see, the thing is, and I think that the topic that we will be discussing today is going to be testimonial to this. See, the facts are there. The figures, the statistics are there. What makes us unique is our ability to take this information and literally become the ambassadors and translators between the professionals and our community. So we're the liaisons. In our case, it's more than just doing translation. I mean, obviously, you are a clinician, you are a professional. Same thing goes for me and to all the therapists at Access. And so it's not just us translating or just being the middle people. We're saying, look, this is what's going on. Let us speak to our community in a language that they understand. By language, I mean like the literal language, but also the cultural language that is within the community. And this is what's been happening in these conferences. And this is what we hope to continue in the virtual conference that is coming up both on the 27th of September and was it the 4th of October? So that's like one Sunday and then the following Sunday. Am I correct? I think you froze there, Sarah. Is that you or me that froze? You're back now. Somebody give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. I know that Sarah is not here. If you can hear me, just give me thumbs up and we'll take it from here, inshallah. And I will move with this. All right. Thank you, Shireen. Okay, so I was saying before we got disconnected, thank you, Farah, as well. What we were talking about is really, really inviting you to make sure that you show up on the 27th of September as well as the 4th of October for our conference. And today we are going to be discussing a very sensitive topic. It's really, really an important topic. It is sensitive in a way, but we really, it is a must that we discuss it. As you have seen on our flyer, today we are talking about the S word, a word that many of us hope and wish never to go through it or any of our loved ones, but unfortunately reality tells us otherwise. Today we wanted to talk about suicide, and as you know, September is Suicide Awareness Month, and we want to bring up these topics, and like as we always say, whenever we bring up these topics, we want to make sure that we are not belittling. This is Sarah calling. We are not belittling or undermining the experience of anybody, and we will try to be as careful as possible when we discuss this topic. And I apologize ahead of time that if any of you, have experienced the loss of a loved one due to suicide, we just want to make sure that your experience is cherished. It is something that we really want to make sure that we are very respectful of. So we are talking about suicide because it is a serious issue. Statistically speaking, Sarah, if I am correct, about one person takes their life away every 40 seconds around the world. And I believe that it is about the 10th leading cause of death around the world. In the US, I believe that the statistics are about, what is it? One person takes away their life every 15 seconds, which brings it, am I right about these statistics? Last I checked was about 90 people every day, I believe, do that. So it is very, very serious. And sometimes in our communities, people believe that these topics really do not talk to us because we believe that our community does not go through these issues. And believe me, that is not true. Sometimes people take pride in their religious beliefs. Christians and Muslims, they would say that, we're practicing people, we are people of faith, and therefore these issues do not really impact us, and they're not a problem. But as we've been saying in all of our talks with regard to mental health, a person can be very tender in their heart and very troubled in their mind. And that does not take away from their belief or from their, assumed relationship with God. But this is an issue that transcends all cultural barriers, all ethnic barriers, all religious barriers, socioeconomic and educational barriers. It is just all over the place. And I tell you, Sierra, I remember about 8 years ago when Robin Williams committed suicide. I remember I think you're muted. I can't hear you. I can't hear
Can you
you.
hear me?
I can hear you now. But I remember when Robin Williams committed suicide.
Yeah, I was thinking that was such a shocker, especially because
That
of the
was
role that
that
he
was a
always right.
it
He
was
always
a bit,
had this
and I
role of
remember.
silly, happy
Good.
man.
Oh, not only was he a happy man, but we assumed that
Right.
not only was he a happy man, but he made a lot of us happy people. And I remember Mrs. Doubtfire. I don't know if you've seen Mrs.
Yes,
Doubtfire.
of course,
I
one of my
don't know if
favorite movies. Yes.
exactly. I don't know if Nahal has seen Mrs. Doubtfire. But I tell you, man,
Yeah.
I have seen that movie at least 5 times. And that movie is brilliant. And it was not just Mrs. Doubtfire, it was just so many other things. The guy was a stand-up comedian and he was adored. He made so many people laugh. And then, you know what? You come and you hear that Robin Williams committed suicide. And I remember I was given the Friday sermon, the Friday khutbah, the following day or a few days after. And it was just a big deal, to come in. And if you remember in our depression educational meeting, remember that there was one of the myths of depression is if nobody, unless you are sad, you are not depressed. And that was a myth because here is somebody who seemingly is a comedian, somebody, I mean, in order to produce jokes, you have to be in the mood of producing jokes, which is you're creating fun. So we would think that this is a lot of fun. And I'm saying his example because it shatters every myth that people have out there. So he was rich by virtue of what he did and how long he's been doing it for, by the profession that he was in. You would think that if anybody is going to do this, it would not be him, and it would not be a person in their profession. So I guess what I'm saying is that it will be a bit too gullible of us to assume that we are too immune, or that one person is too immune for something like this.
Yeah, one of the things when I know that when we plan to talk about this, one of the things that came to my mind was just the fact that the pandemic has been going on.
Mm.
I am sure that depression was at a rise during the pandemic. And so you're right, you don't have to actually be sad to be depressed, but I know that the pandemic had impacted many strong feelings for people. And so with that being said,
I'm sorry. And Sarah, interesting you brought this up. Do you remember the ER doctor that actually took away her own life few months back? If you do you remember that case, I believe she was in
I
she
can
was in Boston. Yes, she was an ER doctor, and she was seeing a lot of COVID cases. At least if I remember the case correctly. And what has happened is that it just became too much, and it became too unbearable for her, and she really ended up taking away her own life. Okay, so again, the profession, what people do, how rich people are. I mean, these can all be protective elements, but do not assume by virtue of what the profession is or what people do that they are somehow automatically immediately immune from this.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to suicide, and I know it's a very strong word, and I know that many things probably come to mind. People have questions. I mean, is there a way to stop it, Sheikh? Is it that simple where it's like, how do you prevent that from ever being the case for somebody?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What are
And
your thoughts on
again,
that?
these are unfortunately with this, we end up asking more questions than us giving answers. And I tell you, interestingly speaking, if and again I take back our viewers to our presentation on depression. If you remember, we said that 80% of the people who commit suicide do so because of an undiagnosed or an untreated mental disorder. And the most common is depression. Okay. So if we pay attention, especially to depression, I think that there is a great part of it that can actually be preventable. And that is part of why we do the things that we do. You spoke about stigma and the need to reduce stigma. But also remember the other three components of what we try to do, and that is educate and enlighten the public, offer support to those who may be going through this or their loved ones may be going through it, and then promote policies and activities that would actually support the people who are going through the mental illness or their loved ones who are taking care of them. So I do believe that if addressed properly, if brought and talked about more, I believe that it is actually preventable. I was reading, and I'm sorry, I'm just getting too excited here, and I'm talking too much. I'm not getting too excited, because the subject is exciting, but I am very passionate about the whole notion of prevention and what can be done. I was reading about Japan, and you know that in Japan, I mean, of all the industrialized nations, Japan had one of the highest rates as far as suicide is concerned. And what they did, part of it is, which is really, strange, but what part of what they did is that they required that all the municipalities, that every given month, all municipalities, they must actually publish, the suicide that is going on in their municipalities. And I say, what is this going to do to the people? And what has happened is that A great part of it, especially in the 1990s, that was attributed to the Asian financial crisis that was going on back in the 1997. What happened is that they spoke so much about it that the Japanese citizens began to view suicide as a public health problem rather than a personal problem to deal with in private. And that is why I say the minute we do this, people no longer, or hopefully, people will no longer be suffering in silence. And what happened is exactly what we're talking about. In 2006, the country passed legislations that fund suicide awareness and prevention campaigns. And here's the kicker. By 2012, in 6 years, the number of suicide deaths had fallen below 30,000 for the first time in more than a decade. So I look into this and I say, look, like you asked, is there something that can be done about it? Yes. And we see that in the example of Japan, they really did do something about it. And I find this to be so unbelievably impressive.
That's amazing, actually. And I like that because it's a way for the entire community to unite and advocate for each other as a whole. So I definitely appreciate how it became a public health issue for the entire society there.
But yeah, but remember, it became a public health issue, and it moved away from making it as a personal problem that the individual and their family need to deal with in private, because that was the alternative. That was, the status quo. This is what was happening prior to Japan moving this way, and it has actually proven to work. That's what I like. And it has, not only has it proven to work, it has proven to work in a very short period of time. In 6 years, you just reshaped the way that people conceptualize suicide from a personal problem. Now it is deemed as a public health issue. And I find that to be such an impressive um, accomplishment by the people of Japan. I think it's impressive.
So we think of suicide, and we come to understand that suicide is from somebody who is depressed. And so obviously that amount of depression is so much to bear that they choose to end their lives. And so one of the preventative measures is to actually raise awareness to depression and the impacts of it. And then learning how to prevent depression from taking place once you understand what depression actually is and how it can happen to anybody. And then on top of that, to actually embrace self-care, because now you're learning ways to take care of yourself. And so when feelings of sadness or grief or trauma happen or take place in a person's life, they will seek other ways to cope through it. Is that what I'm hearing, Shia?
Yes, and that's precisely, I think, part of the of the way that we address this, and that is, if we know that 80% of the people who go and commit suicide, they have either an untreated or an undiagnosed mental illness, and the most common one is depression. I think what is important is to get to know what depression is, and also to look for clues. When somebody is going through these difficult times, and we realize by education that is taking place. I remember a few years back, I was in SoCal, and we had a young man that took away his life, in our own community, in the Muslim community in Southern California. And what happened is, I was invited to come and speak about depression, and I spoke about depression, and, I spoke about suicide. And then after the lecture, the sister of this young man that, just killed himself, he goes, look, everything that you said, perfectly fits what my brother was going through. She said, like, it was a classical case of suicide that, ended up depression that ended up in suicide. And the sad part is, hindsight is always 2020, and people just look. Had we known, maybe we could have done something about it. And remember, the point here is not to guilt people, But what we want to do is that we want to enlighten ourselves, educate ourselves, so that we can actually recognize these symptoms when they come up. And then it'll be a good idea for us to just quickly review what are the symptoms of depression. Remember, not every depression ends in suicide. That is not what we are saying. However, what we are saying is 80% of the people who commit suicide, they actually suffered from depression. I had a neighbor who committed suicide. And I remember a few days before him committing suicide, he was playing with his child outside. And, if you saw them play, you would never think that, what, in 2 days, this person is going to do this to themselves. And again, it just goes back to the misconception that we have about what it means to be depressed, or what it means to be suicidal. So Sarah, if you don't mind, we can just review some of the symptoms of depression. I think that would be helpful to our viewers.
So if you remember from the last time when we spoke actually about depression, we went over the technical guidelines that would diagnose or classify a person underneath depression according to the DSM-5, in which that is the manual the psychiatrists use when they are diagnosing people with depression. One of them is not being able to sleep, for example, right, Sheikh? That change of functioning in life. And so that change in a sleep habit has been lasting for at least 2 weeks. So again, we want to be, and I don't have all of the guidelines in front of me to read them off. I'm sorry, Sheikh, I don't actually have that information handy, although I can go grab it. But it's just to give our viewers some information about what depression actually is, because
Right.
I think we loosely use these words like I'm depressed, and somebody might be saying that simply because they didn't get something that they wanted, even if they really, really wanted it. So the desire was there to have it, but they didn't get it. And so now they claim to be super sad. But when we use the word depressed, do we actually know what it means? Are we actually diagnosed with it? And does that mean you're suicidal? No, of course not. Again, these pieces of information should be taken for what they are. And it's not generalized for every single person, but I'm sure we're probably all thinking of a person that comes to mind when we think of something like this.
Right. Right. So you alluded to some of them. So yes, so we're looking at a pattern, a change in sleep habits. Either people sleeping too much or people sleeping too little. They're having difficulty sleeping, either falling asleep or staying asleep. We're also looking for change in their eating habits. They're either eating too much or they're eating too little. They're losing weight or they are gaining weight. We are also looking for a prolonged appearance of sadness, low energy, loss of hope. And then if it gets a little bit serious, we are also looking into the person's functionality is actually not doing very well. They are failing in their school, maybe academically they're not doing well, professionally they are not doing well. And most important also, sometimes they can be socially isolated as well. But the loss of hope combined with the sadness, the social isolation, the change in the sleeping habits or the eating habits, and then we're looking into this idea of just the loss of energy. If these things last for more than 2 weeks, we can say that this person is clinically depressed, provided that there was no other life event that took place, a life-changing event that took place that would explain this behavior. The loss of a loved one, failing a class, maybe not getting into school that they wanted to get into, divorce, or any of these cases that would explain why the person is feeling this way. And I say this is important, Sarah, because here's also what we're finding from research, and that is most of the people who commit suicide, prior to them committing suicide, they actually reach out to somebody. They either make a phone call, they speak to somebody, and they just like, it's like their last, way of saying, help me. And I remember I had a client, really, really beautiful soul. A friend called my client, letting them know that, I'm not doing well. And they apologize, saying that, look, I am busy right now, but I will call you back. And few hours later, the friend learns that, this person just took away their life. And just the guilt that this person has to live with, and say, look, maybe I was that person that individual called me. And please remember, to all of our viewers out there, the point here is not to make anybody feel guilty. And by the way, if somebody is really, really determined in doing this, also research tells us that there is very little that can be done about it. And what we're hoping for is not having to wait until then, but actually be able to to address these issues, to recognize them before they become too big and they become too unbearable for the individuals that are involved in it.
Thank you for pointing that out, Sheikh, because you bring up something super important to clarify. Again, people go through hardship, people go through problems, and then as a result, they might experience sadness. And they may experience depression. However, depression also comes from other situations. There's many factors that come into play when you're diagnosed with depression. And so it's super important to understand that not everybody's depressed if, they went through a problem, but that could be a possibility. And so in order to prevent that, in order to prevent the loss of interest, the loss of hope, the loss of confidence from taking place, people are encouraged to seek things like counseling. And so this is obviously also another gentle reminder for everybody listening. This may not affect you personally, but if you do have people in your life that you're probably thinking about, know that if they are reaching out, then maybe they do need your help. And maybe it's just like Sheikh described right now, a simple answer of the phone call might just do it. And that's not to hold everybody accountable, but it's just to raise awareness on this problem and the little things that we can do to ultimately change it. I don't actually have the actual statistics, Sheikh,
Yeah.
but I do know that there are some people that when they reach that point to want to end their lives, there's just a matter of seconds that can actually change their mind. I mean, just like thinking back to like watching a movie where somebody's about to jump off a bridge in a movie, for example. You see the rescue team come out, and it's really all a matter of seconds, depending on what they're going to say, to get this person to change their mind. It's so fascinating to know that they could have gone through so much to finally make this decision. But here we are, just another person reaching out, another person showing support and reminding that person how life can be very beautiful and valuable if they gave it a chance, and they turn back. So I always found that to be really super interesting how that takes
You
place.
you actually remind me of somebody who woke up in the morning and decided that if nobody asked them how they were doing today, he was going to kill himself, like literally. So he said that he got out of the house, he sees his neighbors, and as somebody said, describe your neighborhood to me. And he said, it's very easy to describe. 7 a.m. the garage doors go up, 7 p.m. the garage doors come down, meaning that people don't really know each other. There is no inquiring of each other. So he said that he drove his car going to the Golden Gate Bridge, which is like, unfortunately, a place where a good number of people go there. And what happened is, he said that he went there and he said that nobody asked him how he was doing. He parked his car and he found a couple there, and they said good morning, and they asked if he can take a picture. And he said they were nice, but nobody really asked me how I was doing. So he parked his car, walked there, and he jumped off the bridge. And he said, as soon as I jumped, I knew I wanted to live. So he positioned himself in such a way that if anybody knows swimming, you go at the pencil style. Keep your body straight, your hands on the side, feet hit the water first, and remain as straight as possible. And he actually did. And it takes about 4 to 6 seconds before you hit the water, depending on the person's weight. But he lived, and I think he was one of 4 people that actually lived jumping off the bridge. And that's why we know the story. But the story is really, like you said, it's the pickup of the phone call, the inquiring of how are you doing, and just the checking up on people, because because we don't really know what might give people that hope. It could be that person that just reached out, hey, why don't you come over for coffee and let's grab lunch together, or let's, because remember, part of depression is the social isolation, and and many times, we look at this as what we refer to as the protective factors. Look, we are all going to go through some kind of problems in our lives, and many times some of us, I wish I was dead, man. Okay, but we don't really actively go and seek to do that and bring it upon ourselves. So we what we want to do is that we want to consider some of the protective factors, as far as, okay, so why do some people end up there and some people really do not end up there? So, and the very first one that they mention is strong connection to a family and community support. And that is so unbelievably vital. And I love that saying, Sarah. It say that with our friends, we get to double our joy and we get to divide our misfortune. You know what? I just graduated. You end up calling people, I just got this and I just got, and every time we speak about this, we are literally doubling our joy. And every phone call of support and condolences that we receive is just a way of dividing our misfortune. We do this with family, we do this with friends. And that is why it is not a surprise that the very most important protective factor is that sense of belonging and being a member of family and a community.
You bring up a very interesting thing when you say it's super important to have family and friends in your life, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what they're there for, to be with you through thick and thin. Now, what about the people who have very strong um, faith and they still have depression? Can that actually happen? Because I know that's another myth going on. Like, well, if you're close to your religion, you wouldn't have this issue to begin with. What are your thoughts on that, Sheikh?
Okay, so it is true. Actually, another protective factor is personal, social, cultural, and religious beliefs that discourage suicide and support self-preservation. That is actually really important, because remember, the whole point here is that you belong to this community, and the norms and the culture of that community is that this is not something that we do. This is not something that, and that's why, for example, suicide in Islam is prohibited. In Christianity, it is considered to be a sin. In Judaism, it is prohibited as well. And what they're saying here is that the more a person belongs to this group, that is actually part of the protective factor. What we tell people, though, is because you are a practicing Muslim, Jew, or Christian, you are not inherently protected against depression or anxiety or anything like that. That is part of the myths in religious communities, and that is your faith is going to inherently, by default, protect you from these things. And that's why I love to repeat this idea that a person can be very tender in their heart and very troubled in their mind. And the fact that you are a practicing Muslim, Jew, or a Christian is not necessarily taken away from you. All we are saying is right now, the state that you are in, the pain is too hard for you to carry on your own. That burden is just too heavy for you to handle it by yourself. But if we continuously tell people that your depression is caused by lack of faith, we will end up with a lot of people suffering in silence. So religious cultural beliefs are a protective factors, provided that the people also have access to help and that they are not deemed that depression is a personal problem that people need to deal with in private. At that point, you know what, I really want to come to the mosque, to the church, to the temple, to the synagogue, but I'm not going to talk about any of these issues, because it'll just immediately, I will be labeled as weak of faith or weak of character or personality.
Thank you for answering that, because I know that many people have that misconception. Well, I mean, if I was close to my religion, I wouldn't have that problem. Also, just looking back at some of the teenagers I remember from the middle school, that would be another thing with the parents, where they would be disappointed in the child for not being closer to the religion, and that's why they're even having these depressive thoughts to begin with. So it's
Yeah.
super important to understand that they're two separate things. However, of course, people are encouraged to seek a spiritual consultation if in fact they feel that there's an issue going on with that matter of their lives.
Yeah.
Sheikh, I know one of the questions on the flyer, what do I do when I'm sick and tired of life? You know, we hear people say all the time, I wish I was dead. I don't want to be here. And they may or may not mean it. But
Yeah.
for those who actually do mean it, what
Yeah.
are we encouraging them to do?
You know, I mean, we have to come from a place of understanding that to some people, life really sucks, and life has just been, as the saying goes, they've been, handed a really, really difficult card. They've been dealt a difficult card, and we are not going to pretend that their life is easy or what they're going to do through is simple or anything like that. We want to acknowledge that yes, to some life is really, really, really difficult, and what they are facing is extremely, sad. However, I also want to add that suicide is literally transferring the pain to somebody else. That is really what we are doing. When we take our own lives, we are literally transferring the pain to somebody else, and that is whoever is going to outlive you. Or, the whole notion of, suicide being a permanent solution for a temporary problem. Because all the things that, we go through are in that sense, they are temporary. So our acceptance, understanding of the fact that life is difficult, the next step is not let's bring it to an end. That is not the way to go about it. Yes, sometimes it may feel just too tiring to continue to live, but we want people to patiently persevere. We want people to reach out to their friends. We want people to reach out to their communities. We're not going to pretend, I'm not going to give a pep talk to people and say, well, you know what, when life gives you lemon, make lemonade. I think that has its place. When the going gets tough, the tough keep going. I believe that also has its place. But there is a time when I'm going to say, look, going for you is really tough right now. I think you can use some help. And that is what we want people to do and say, that right now I'm just so sick and tired of life by myself. I need to seek some help. And that's what we want people to do. If you ever find yourself at that place, please, please, please seek help. You know, I remember when we were receiving training um, on suicide prevention. That's one of the things that I love at Access. They always made sure that as therapists that we are equipped, and whatever tool we can bring in, that we take. One thing that was really, really nice in one of these trainings that we did through Didi Hirsch is there was the concept of the pullers and the pushers. And basically what that is, the pullers and the pushers is what is pushing you towards suicide and what is pulling you back. And as a therapist, what we want to know is that we want to know what are the pushers and minimize them, and what are the pullers and give them more weight. So who would be sad if you were to do this? Well, my parents, and my friends, and so on. What do you miss out on not having done prior, to you doing this? So you identify the reasons why people would want to live, and you also identify the reason why people would want to just end it all. And right there, it just tells you where the person is. And we want to give more importance, more weight, more power to the reasons as to why people would want to live. And I think that with our friends, when people usually, I'm just so sick and tired of life. Okay, so tell me, it just sounds like you are having this big, huge burden. Tell me about that. And you get to know, what is it? Was it maybe somebody just found out that, unfortunately, maybe they're getting divorced. And to some people that is a big deal, failure of my relationship. A loved one just passed away. They've been feeling guilty. It's the honorable thing to do. I know that in some Asian cultures, the honorable thing to do is, especially when there are, things such as shame, you want to bring your life to an end. So we want to address as far as what is it that is making life so sick and you are tired of it. Okay, and let's talk about that. And what is it that is bringing joy to life, or where do you find joy at this point? But it is about the identifying of the pullers and the pushers that is really, really crucial. And Sarah, I know that we are running out of time, but I think it's also very important that we let our viewers know that suicide is not just one thing that happens immediately. Okay, they actually talk about phases and different stages that people go through prior to suicide. The first one is what we refer to in counseling as ideation, and these are just people. When you think about suicidal ideation, that's just envisioning, when all the pain is gone, and I can no longer take this anymore, I don't have to go. So now what we see here is that the person is having thoughts about suicide, and usually that is the very first stage. And I know that as a therapist, you do ask your clients, especially those who are depressed, if this is something that they are going through. Next stage they speak about is this idea of threatening. Okay, so I'm no longer thinking about it. Now I am verbalizing it. Ideation are things that are taking place in our mind, but as soon as we threaten, it means that we are verbalizing what is going on. And this is what we call the window of prevention. That is really one when we want to talk to people because they've verbalized it. I know a lot of people dismiss this way, oh, they're seeking attention. I know they really don't mean it. But at that point, we really want to make sure that, look, I heard it. I want to know what is going on. Okay. So this is the window of prevention. And that is why it is important that we're talking about these issues. And then, of course, so it's ideation, then it is threatening, and then there are the attempts. And sometimes the attempts are complete, and sometimes the attempts are, fortunately, they would be incomplete. But I think it is important that we become aware of where the person is so that we can actually address these issues adequately with them.
We do have a question from one of our participants. Can you hear me?
Sarah, I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah. We do have a question from one of our participants.
Okay.
She once heard from a sheikh him say, don't ever tell a depressed person to treat their depression by solely reciting the Quran. This is in regards to us talking about religion and being too religious to have depression. When someone breaks their leg, you don't just tell them to read the Quran and not go see a doctor. Why do we do this to those who are depressed in our communities?
Yeah. I think it has to do with the misconception and the lack of awareness of what it means to be depressed. Remember, it is all part of the stigma. And I've given this example so many times. And it really does happen. If I were to come to you and I say, look, I am feeling depressed lately, and you look at me and you say, well, have you read the Quran lately? I would say, look, man, I was depressed before talking to you, and now I am more depressed after talking to you. Because this is what we refer to as a classical case of blame the victim theology. That my depression is my fault. And how is it my fault? You really didn't say that, but your answer or your questioning of me whether I read the Quran or not is insinuating, suggesting, alluding to the fact that, you know what, I am not as faithful as I need to be, and as a consequence, I am suffering from depression. So when we give into these myths and these misconceptions, what happens is that we are literally telling people to suffer in silence. And I think really, really important as well is saying something religious does not make what you're saying right. Okay? So asking a depressed person to read the Quran makes you sound religious. but it does not necessarily make you right. I'm not sure if you're following this idea. And sometimes, in religious communities, we do want to say something religious, but you can be saying something that is religious and erroneous simultaneously. Like you said, you broke your leg, you don't tell person to recite the Quran. So I've got issues with my serotonin in my brain somehow, because there is that chemical imbalance component of depression as well. So we will tell that person, in addition to reading the Quran or whatever book you find to be comforting, because I'm assuming that also some of our viewers can also be members, of the non-Muslim community, and that happens in Christian churches. You hear this all the time. In Jewish synagogues, you hear this all the time, and that is why we have this idea of how do you seek healing, and we say dua, dawa, ghidha, kisa, and that is the notion of do your prayers, dua, seek dawa, medicinal help in whatever form. Counseling is part of that dawa. Then we say ghidha, pay attention to your diet. And then we say kisa, pay attention to the environment that you are in. And with these three components, you get to speak to the spiritual aspect, the biological aspect, you get to speak to the social aspect, and you get to speak to the environmental aspect. And they would all have an impact on that individual.
That was super enlightening, Chef. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? No.
We can hear you, but we can hear you now. It takes a while to hear you.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, I can only tell because it highlights my box. So now you can hear me. I was just complimenting you on that super insightful lesson.
I know you don't do that often, but
I don't, but I truly do appreciate what you just said. It really did hit home for me. And again, this all falls within the stigma that is attached, unfortunately, to mental health and the lack of awareness that takes place. Hence the fact we have this Peace of Mind conference happening. I did put the registration link in the chat box. Just to clarify, suicide prevention is not one of the topics. However, we are talking about trauma, we are talking about hardship, we are talking about preventing unhealthy behaviors, and so they are somehow related. So please do go ahead and register for our conference happening at the end of this month and the following week after, which is October 4. They're both on a Sunday, so hopefully you are available and ready to join us. Other than that, Sheikh, I know that we are going to be meeting in another 2 weeks. Our topic has yet to be developed, but we will go ahead and share that flyer once it's ready.
Yeah, and Sarah, before I let our viewers go, just want to make sure that we don't. And sometimes the difficulty in addressing a topic like this, like an hour, is really not enough. Like the training that we got was a weekend long, so you came there all day Saturday, all day Sunday. It was 2 days. So I know that we put a lot of emphasis on mental illness as a potential cause of suicide, and it is true that it is one of the high top ranking ones. But sometimes people want to consider suicide because of school difficulties, sometimes broken or failed relationships, sometimes it is separation, sometimes it is people feeling rejected. Unfortunately, physical and sexual abuse is also part of that list. And the next one is the really, really sad one, and that is children who are being bullied. I don't know if you've been looking into that, and I know that you as a school counselor, I've just there was a time, especially bullying. When people just stuff is put out there online, and people just don't know how to go back to school again. And I remember doing all these things about cyberbullying, and how a good number of these young people would just take away their life because they just could not continue living after what people have been, after what people have said about them online. So we really, really do want to be aware of where the person is. Mental illness, please check on people. School difficulties, do please check on people. After people, go through separation or divorce, please do check on them. Please do check on people who have gone through these traumatizing events that we'll be addressing, physical or sexual. Kids who are being bullied, separation, or rejection. some people react very intensely and strongly to these things. And that is where really our role as friends and as community members and as family members, we want to check out on these people and just make sure that are you okay? And I think if we are able to do that, then I would say that, look, this relationship, this friendship was a really meaningful one, because it just came right when I needed it.
Absolutely. That is a gentle reminder for everybody to check up on your loved ones, be observant to the people in your surrounding. Just like Sheikh said, social isolation is a big sign. So if you see that happening, take it upon yourself to join that person and offer some good company. Because at the end of the day, it's something as small as that can actually make a huge difference in that person's life. Thank you, Sheikh, for the inspiring lesson. Thank you to everybody joining us. Again, we will be meeting you guys once again on our Mindful Wednesday series in 2 more weeks. So look out for the flyer. We're going to be posting it on our social media and our website. As always, we'll have updated information. We are really excited about the Peace of Mind Conference. Again, that's another reminder to go ahead and register. With that being said, Sheikh, it was so good having you here. Inshallah, I'll see you soon. Take care,
Inshallah,
everybody.
it was good being with you, and thank you all for joining us. And we will see you next week, inshallah. Not next week, the week
The
after.
following.
Yes.
I know you really, really want to have to come see me every single week, Sheikh, but we have to give everybody a chance. So next week, we're going to give you a break, hang out with the family, and then the following we'll rejoin here.
All right, inshallah. We'll see you in 2 weeks. You take care.
Bye-bye.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, you did good there. You didn't mess up too much today with the. Well, you need to work on the voice though. I don't know what's going on with the sound system.
Yeah.
But mashallah, you did that flyer in about 10 minutes to get the flyer up there.
It
Mashallah.
was actually a minute. It wasn't 10. That's not true. And also, to my defense, with Zoom, all these kids are getting on because of school. The service is just too much.
So now we're blaming the application. MashaAllah. All right. Good.
Well, it worked for the most part. Thank you anyway.
Allah, take care.
All right. Bye-bye.